to today's episode of Who Gets the China, where we are navigating life with aging parents. And I'm really excited to have a repeat guest with me today, Julie Butscher, who is a licensed clinical social worker and an expert in all things aging and mental health. She was a guest last season and got so much great feedback from our episode that we decided to bring her back. So, Julie, thanks so much for being with us today.
Thank you for having me.
So, Julie gave us so many amazing little nuggets of wisdom last time, from things like the seventh voice, having no plan is also having a plan, the spoons theory, just so many little pieces of practical wisdom. And I'm excited to learn more from her today. She's started a company that's called Sunset Counseling with the perspective of therapy for seniors. How, when, why therapy might be called for, and also as the caregiver, as the daughter, how you can get that conversation going, because not that many caregivers or older people are receptive to therapy or think they need it. Right? They might be receptive, but might not cross their mind that it could be a solution that could be useful. So we're going to kind of dig into a lot of issues related to that today. And I'm calling it sort of when to call in the reinforcements. One thing that I kind of wanted to start with was mental health in older adults can look different. Some of the cues that we might be used to looking for in ourselves or in our teenagers or our kids don't really apply. And so let's talk for a minute about some of the mental health issues that seniors might be facing. And then we'll talk about kind of what are some of the cues to look for that we might be missing. So in your practice, talk to us a little bit about what are some of the things you see?
Well, one of the big things is sometimes it's kind of hard to differentiate between cognitive and some memory loss and depression. And sometimes when somebody is completely overwhelmed, especially with, I see this a lot with when a caregiver is taking care of their spouse and the spouse is having health issues. And all of a sudden, the caregiver, who's been very responsible, is forgetting to take their own meds. And people start going, you know, is this that mom or dad, is showing signs of cognitive decline, memory loss, or is it that the caregiver is so overwhelmed by this new situation and depression? And it could be that they are starting to really feel down and overwhelmed, and they are preemptively grieving the loss of their spouse because they suddenly see that maybe this is the end. And they are so, for some women, they've never taken on the finances, and in some men have never taken on the finance. I mean, like
Right.
in my parents' situation, it's actually the reverse. My mom's always handled the finances and not my dad. But typically I find it is a lot of women, and they are overwhelmed. And so you start seeing these cognitive, and people start going down this route of, is mom having cognitive decline? And
Mm-hmm.
if it's cognitive decline, you should treat that differently than depression. And, it's this whole thing about, like, depression, anxiety, normal aging, being overwhelmed, all of those things can be treated differently. And sometimes as the child, you're not sure what you're seeing because, frankly, your parent might not know what they're dealing with either.
Right.
They might not be able to name it, and certainly, we've talked about that, this generation, sort of the pull yourself up by the bootstraps. We don't talk about problems. Yeah.
It's true.
And
We don't
so, I
talk
mean,
about it.
and if you do talk about it, it's, you go through the whole thing about, like, why are you talking about it? Are you talking about it to be a gossip? Are you talking about it, and so that's a whole nother different thing, but trying to figure out, which emotion it is. And all of those could be a reason to start therapy. And, therapy could be the answer for all of it. And sometimes I find that people are more willing to go to therapy for a reason. So not just, oh, you seem down to me. Would it be helpful to talk to somebody? Like sometimes it's like, Mom, you have so much going on right now. You're taking care of the house, you're taking care of dad, you're, dealing with this and that and, whatever it is. And I don't think I can give you as the child. I'm too emotionally invested and you don't want to tell me all of your problems because you don't want to say to me like I'm scared to death of losing dad because they know you're scared to death of losing your father, or however it
Yeah.
plays out. And so there's a parent still might be like wanting to not burden their children. And so that's when it's nice to have an outside person. And finding a therapist that works with older adults is very important. There are a lot of times that people say, oh, I think I can, I haven't worked with a lot of seniors, but I'm sure I can handle it. And so some therapists, and sometimes they're right and sometimes they're wrong, but there are things that an older generation will say that may not be something that, I mean, someone my age would actually say. And because I've been around so many seniors for so long, when they say these things, it means something different for me. And let me give you an example because
Yeah. Give us an
there's
example.
yeah, because I'm kind of being nebulous in how I say that. But like when I first started doing home visits and I would be talking to people about whether they needed care in the home. And I would hear a lot, well, if I'm going to need that, just take me out back. And that was the first time that happened. Now, like I've gotten to where I understand what they're saying is, I don't like how my life is going. I don't like losing control. A lot of the times it has to do around with moving into a community. And I don't want to do that. So, now when I hear that, yes, I do an assessment to make sure that they are not, that this is not a plea for somebody really being at the end of their rope and really, it's not a suicidal ideation. I do have to look into that, but I then have to break it down and say, okay, let's talk about what you absolutely don't want to do. And let's start there. And let's talk about and sort of the breaking it into chunks because people aren't usually willing to say, I want to bring in help. They have to say, I'm willing to have somebody clean my toilets.
Right. I feel like my parents would benefit from some extra hands on deck. They are doing amazing, like we just talked about. I mean, my parents still want to, go out and do their activities, but also there are things like making doctor's appointments, managing health issues that I see what you're saying. It brings on added stress for them.
Right.
And then we want to jump in and help. But sometimes an unemotionally attached third party is better equipped to provide the right type of help because we're going down some discussions about cognitive decline. And also, I've noticed like my dad has been super stressed about a number of things lately. And it's hard to unwind the ball of yarn and know what are we really dealing with? Is this just kind of like a temporary stressful situation because other outside influences are happening? Or is it more of a cognitive decline? And I mean, I'm not skilled. I don't know how to break those things apart.
And sometimes things look differently. Sometimes it looks like it's a start of a cognitive decline. If you bring in a therapist and you start working, and then when you start unrolling, I love that ball of yarn, and you start unrolling it and you start taking some things off people's plates, they are able better to focus. We all work in an area like a heightened level of stress, and you add in some stressful situations. I think I know more now in my 50s than in my 30s. And so I think that there's a reason why I thank God I had my kids in my 30s because I didn't know all the things I should have been worried about when they were 2 or 3, which now, and so you think about that is how much more heightened I would be, now our parents are even that much more, having, 20, 30 years on us. I definitely think even if somebody doesn't admit it, that there is some stress that of being alone. And so that's when it is so nice to talk to somebody that is not emotionally attached. Everyone is dealing with something slightly different with
Mm-hmm.
an underlying theme of being scared of being alone, scared of being the only person to hold things together,
Yes.
and that they don't want to be a burden. I hear a lot of times people say, well, I don't want to be a burden, therefore I don't want to talk about my problems. Well, if they're talking to their child or their spouse about it, then it sounds like a burden. But if they're talking to me, somebody who's not connected at all to their life, that does not have an emotional attachment to the same people,
Mm-hmm.
I think that that's pretty important to have that.
Yeah, it is. And I'm thinking, my mom, we were having a conversation about bringing in some outside help. And I thought I found a great solution. That didn't quite work out. And she said to me, well, I still don't understand what this help is going to do. Like, they can't pay our bills or deal with our finances because we wouldn't trust somebody to do that. And what I hear you putting a different frame on that is my mom's anxiety about what if and perhaps when she has to all of a sudden become the primary financial manager of the household, which that hasn't been her responsibility.
Yeah.
It's like she's nervous about that. And
Yeah.
I am too. I mean, but like you said, what are you not looking at that might be going on in the background that
Right.
could be concerning? And I want to capture what I think is a really insightful question that you had as we started talking about this, which was, dad or mom, what's stressful for you right now?
Hmm.
Because I think sometimes I'm guilty. Like, something different is stressful for me about what's going on with their situation.
Totally.
But we need to ask, what's stressful for you? And I did this sort of inadvertently asking my dad the other day because all these things were happening. And he was like, well, I'm just totally stressed out about taxes right now. Like, I've got to get my taxes dealt with. So I was like, okay, well, give me your accountant's number. I'll call. We'll do it together. But like you're saying, it gets back to that therapy for a minute, which is asking them, what's stressful for you? Okay, how can either I help or how can we find the right external support to deal with what's keeping you up at night? Because what's keeping you up at night might not be what's keeping me up at night.
And, some of it could be that whole like, I don't want to tell you what it is that's keeping me up at night, because
Right.
there's that whole idea that if I say it out loud, it'll be true. And so I'd rather just worry about it and never mention it. And so that is one of the things that I find that people will tell me as the therapist, something that they would never tell their family, because if they admitted to their family, I'm scared to be alone, they're afraid that they look weak. But hear me as an outside person, they can say to me, I'm scared to be alone. And then that's something that we can talk about in therapy, but their children never have to know about. It's not that they've really said it out loud, because they only said it to me and I'm not,
Right. No one else
one
heard
of
it.
their, nobody else heard it.
Yeah.
And everything that stays with us is confidential, unless it's something hurting someone or else.
When we have little kids, or parenting articles often talk about when your kid comes to you with something that's difficult, using that old, do you want to be heard, helped, or hugged? It's not exactly the same with an older parent, but something we were talking about is they don't always need a solution. But what I think you're getting at is sometimes it's not always about finding a solution. It's just about acknowledging the loss of autonomy or control. And it's hard for us to hear that.
I also have a lot of people that say to me, I don't want to deal with the past. And in therapy, you can direct what you talk about. Now, as a therapist, sometimes I pick up, people will say, oh, I don't want to talk about the past. But then they keep telling me stories about when they were 5 or 6. And so I'll then say, do you want to talk about that now? I always think it's interesting, these people that said, oh, past is past. I just want to look towards the future, all of that. But then once they get into that safe environment, that could be something that they do want to look into.
I get that, right? Because sometimes I'm like, yeah, I know. I've already been through those things. I've dealt with those things in therapy. Like, I don't want to go back and focus on that, whatever it was. I just want to figure out how I'm going to be the best version of myself now. But We can't help our programming, right? It's just so deeply embedded within us. And I have a question for you. If I'm 85, can I change?
Oh, yes, 100%. And I think change might look different, but I do not think I could be in this field if I did not believe everybody was resilient and everybody had the ability of being the best selves that they could be. So change, like somebody who is really grumpy, they're probably always going to be grumpy. That personality trait might always be there, but what we could talk about is the fact that their grumpiness is maybe affecting other people, and talking about, like, does that bother you? Does it bother you that your children get upset when you say these things? You have a choice. You can either say these things and your kids keep getting upset, or do not say those things in front of your kid. And so in that sense, that is a change.
Yes.
Like,
You're
so
not
if
changing
somebody,
yourself, but you're changing behaviors.
and you're changing behaviors. And sometimes it's giving people some different breathing mechanisms. Like, okay, when you're with this group of people, you're not telling you get any value from being with this group of people. Why are you still going to whatever it is?
Right. Your
And
quilting ladies drive you crazy. Don't spend time with them. Spend time with the church ladies or whatever the case may be.
yeah, exactly. And maybe there is one quilt lady that you like. And if you know Susie's not going to quilting that day, you could say, oh, wait, something came up. I'm not going to be able to make it. And then, and so those are things that we could work on.
They can
And
learn strategies to maximize, optimize their life, just like we all can if we're
exactly.
open to it.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's take this in a direction of who gets the china for a minute. So,
Mhm.
like for instance, in my house, we have a program of saving, keeping, holding on to things because they could be worth something, or it's just too hard to go through the box of Cabbage Patch Kids or Smurfs or whatever the thing is. I'm curious, can therapy help with that?
Definitely. Definitely. So I think one thing is, you know, finding out why people are holding on to things. You know, in the industry, people are trying to get away from using the word hoarders, because I think
Hmm.
hoarders have such and I'm not, so it's just having to stuff. And for many people, a lot of times it comes down to a scarcity. They're afraid of being without. One of the things I think is very helpful is to say to people, there's a fire in your house. What 5 things do you grab? You can only pass along 5 things to each of your children. What 5 things? And then write down those 5 things. I had this one gentleman who he had all of these trophies. And so the kids did not want the trophies. They're like, where do I put my dad's? And so, it was one of those things that, like, I mean, he actually knew what it was. Sometimes people don't know what it is, the one thing that they want to give, but he knew. And so we sort of just talked about, like, how about if we take pictures of all of your trophies and we write down the story of each of those trophies. Maybe we make a book like Shutterfly, and you make a book that has a picture of the trophy and why it's important. That's something your kids probably would love to keep. Then so working with somebody like on issues like that, does that feel okay? What if it's
Hmm.
a plaque of each of the trophies? So what if we took off that? What if we could take these trophies and donate them to these golf league for little kids getting started in golf? What if we could donate all of your trophies to them and they could be repurposed that way? That's just an example. Somebody that has bookcases and bookcases of books, there could be a book in there that is extremely important. We just went through my dad's book, and my dad pulled out this one book and told me, this is the first time I wanted to travel, was when I read this book. And we would have probably given that book away because none of us had ever heard that story. And I remember looking at my sister, and my sister was like, I want that. And like
Don't
that,
throw that out. That's not going to the
don't throw
Goodwill.
that. Yeah. But had you said to the four of us, oh, mom and dad have 3 rooms full of books. What do you want? We'd all be like, oh,
I
just
know.
don't,
Just give them
no, don't
away.
need them. And so that is a piece and that you could talk to somebody about is finding out. So these are the 5 things, that are really important to you, and you want each child to have. And then you do those 5. Okay, now what's the next 5? And so you
Right.
break it into chunks, because to say to somebody, what are the most important things to give to people? They're going to come up a list with 20. But when you say, let's start with the first 5.
Right. It's nice to start from a place of what do you value the most? What
Right.
matters the most? Maybe it's a piece of jewelry. One thing that my mom had is letters from my uncle when he was in Vietnam that he wrote home. And so it's like, okay, let's do something with those, right? So I have them. They're still waiting for me to scan them in, but I'm going to do it. But make a little Shutterfly book of that, right? Because otherwise they're just going to deteriorate and get lost. But that's a really interesting part of my family history that I don't want to lose.
Having a shoebox full of pictures or shoebox full of letters, whatever it is, that is overwhelming. But being able to take it and say, okay, I'm going to do something with it.
Now I'm going out to see my parents in a couple weeks. So I've got renewed enthusiasm for just getting this task underway, getting it done, making it happen. Because I've been wanting to do it for 6 months and I've taken steps, but I haven't crossed the finish line. And so you're inspiring me and reminding me that that's something that is important that I really want to do. So, like, let's get that done. Let's prioritize that. Okay, I want to talk for a minute about the actual doing of therapy with older adults.
Yes.
So I'll say, like, my mom has been relatively receptive. I think she's more receptive than perhaps many. I don't know if it's helpful or not, but I think you do much of your practice today remote. So
Yes, I do.
how does it work? How would one get their parents started? How would you do the remote appointments? Like, just talk to me about some of the practicality of it.
So it is one of the things that, again, one of the positives of COVID is that a lot of older adults got used to doing telehealth. It is literally an email that goes out that either is, depending on what device that they use, it's either an email or a text, and it's sometimes both. And it's a link that gets sent to them, and all they have to do is press start, and it gets them in there. And it is amazing. I've done it where I have been with people at their house and I've helped them start a telehealth with like a medical doctor,
Yeah.
and they can do it. The nice thing about telehealth is when you start dealing with driving issues, again, it always goes back to,
Mm-hmm.
if you are going to be going to a therapy appointment and you don't drive, it means your child is picking you up, driving you to the appointment, sitting there while you have the appointment, driving you home, driving them back to your house. I get a lot of times people will say to me, I really do better, with face to face. I feel like you and I are sitting in the same room right now because we're
Right.
looking at each other, and so, and I find that more people, they might be resistant to it ahead of time. And I'll say, let's try it. And then if they don't, then I find them a therapist in their area. There's lots of different ways to find therapists that specialize in working with seniors.
I do think it is important because it's not the same set of challenges and issues.
I do think that as the child or the caregiver, you got to help. That is something that I think is okay for you to step in and say, let me do some research. Psychology today is great because you can put in all of the parameters, you can put in your insurance, you can put in whether you went virtual or in person, you can put in your zip code, you can put in what the issues are, and then it gives you 4 or 5 people with a little snippet of their picture. And you, as the child, can do this, and it's totally appropriate, is reaching out to the therapist and saying, I'm looking for someone for my parents. Would you be willing to work with them? Then sharing all of that
Mm-hmm.
information. with your mom, and then you and your mom could say, okay, this is which one I want to do. And most therapists do a free 15-minute eval and just talk to you for 15 minutes just to see if it's the right fit. And if it's not the right fit, they can say, okay, why don't I set up somebody else for you? Or you could say, okay, I have somebody else in mind.
Another thing about remote is just the added privacy, honoring that privacy for them is a benefit of doing it remote. It doesn't have to be a big event to get out of the house to go do it.
So I send a link to this one new patient who I sent her the link and the meeting wasn't until the next week. Well, she clicked on the link immediately, and then it sort of generated a new meeting and all of this. And then she called me and she was in such a panic. And I was like, it's no big deal. It's fixed. And she's like, oh, I'm such an idiot. I'm like, no, you're not. I'm like, that wasn't like, I can see how that happened. I reframed it to be like, well, I'm just glad it worked, that you saw it, you knew how to click on it. And, so that again is one of the things about being with somebody who's worked with a lot with an older person is you don't get upset about that. And I called back, immediately, and she left me a voicemail and said, I messed it up totally. And I'm like, no, you didn't. We fixed it. It's great. Everything worked out.
What about privacy and confidentiality? I know that our relationships with our therapist are confidential, but like, what if the felt like maybe there was some cognitive decline going on, or, I know if there's a threat to self or others, that has to be reported. But are there any sort of different considerations or special considerations about privacy and then working with the family to help them support their older loved one?
Just say I was working with somebody and I felt that their cognitive decline was at a point where it was unsafe for them to be at their house. I would bring it up first to the person and I would say, you know, we've been working together for a long time and I'm noticing some cognitive changes. I Let's talk about how we want to handle this. Do you want to have your son, daughter, spouse come to our next session and we have a joint session? And then they'd say, oh no, I don't want to do that. Okay. I'd gotten the name of your primary care physician when I started with you. Or can I reach out to your primary care physician? So I would first try to see what it is that they're comfortable with. If it really got to a point where I felt like they were a danger to self, I would be mandated to report it. So I would reach out to Adult Protective Services in their community. I mean, I work with Adult Protective Services all the time, not so much in my therapy practice, but when I was doing home health, I would see that a lot. Depending on the situation, I might say, I'm really worried about you. I don't think this is a great situation. I am a mandatory reporter. To be honest, sometimes I tell people and they go, oh, thank God. I mean, I do have
Oh.
people that say, I agree with you and that they are okay with me reaching out. So it's not like every time I call Adult Protective Services, they're coming in and removing that person from their home. It could be that they're coming in and helping get set up transportation,
They could be offering services that would support the person so that they can be independent in their home longer. So what would happen in a case of, like, I'm just thinking about with so much elder fraud that goes on, like if a client said, oh, I just had to go get, $5,000 out of my ATM to give to my girlfriend who is in jail in this other country, and you sense that this feels like fraud, you would have to jump in and report that.
Yeah.
Yeah. I know you can't rely on a therapist to deal with that, but it just feels like more hands offer more security.
And I do think your tone does matter. I mean, like I handle all the finances in our house. And so sometimes I'll say to my husband, like, what did you $300 at Home Depot? And he gets that, like that reaction. So like, I've learned that I say, the Home Depot bill for $300 just came in. How do I key it into Quicken?
Yeah.
What do I put it as? Is it home improvement? So like I have learned
Mm.
to ask the question, and it's the same thing with our parents when my dad had this $5,000 bill, and I was pretty sure I knew what it was. So I said, "Hey, Dad, I saw this $5,000 bill. I'm assuming that that was your hearing aids, and I shouldn't freak out, but the name didn't quite look right. Is that what it was?" "Oh yeah, that's exactly what it was. Yes, I did know about it." "Great, thank you." And
Right.
so like we could move on. But had I called him up and said, like, "Somebody has your credit card. I think your credit card's been stolen. There's $5,000 missing," then he would have not thought at all about the fact that he had just bought $5,000 hearing aids. So again, it goes back to like how we treat somebody, whether it's your spouse or your parents. So if you open up the credit card and you see a $5,000 thing and you are freaking out, maybe you say, "Okay, I got to take a few deep breaths."
Let the emotions
And
subside.
yes,
Just
yeah,
count to 10. I'm wondering, in dealing with the older adults in therapy, are there any common themes that emerge that frustrate older parents about their way their children caregivers either act or engage? Like, are there things we can learn from your experiences as the children that we could do
yes.
better?
Well, have I ever told you about the term that my mom came up with and that she calls me sometimes a helicopter daughter?
No.
The helicopter daughter thing, that is one of the reoccurring themes that I have seen. And so just like we know a helicopter parent who is always sitting there and trying to prevent issues and is trying so hard to put up so many guardrails that they don't let people make mistakes. As children, we can do that. And a big argument a lot of times I see the children want some, it's usually a device. So they want their parent to be using the walker or cane or, using a wheelchair. Yes. And so the children want that. And one of my mantras that I try to tell the kids and tell myself often is people have the right to make their own bad decisions. And when you need to step in is, you know, if it's life threatening. And so I finally did at one point say to my mom, like, "You don't want to use this device. What I'm afraid of is a fall's going to happen and your life is going to change and you're no longer going to have the option of using a walker. You're going to be in a wheelchair. And if you want to stay out of the wheelchair, you got to use a walker." And, and then to be honest, where you talk about change, the change really had to happen to me as the daughter, is that I was the one that had to be like, "Okay, this could be a life ending choice that my parent is making and my parents are making it. And I have to, if that happens, know I had voiced my opinion, I allowed them to make their decision, and I have to live with it." And of course, like, and I'll with my mom, she then did fall when she was on the walker and broke
Course.
something, but
Of
she
course
sort of
she
fell
did. I
over the
mean, yeah, I
walker.
could see that
I know.
exactly
So
how it
that's
would go
like,
down, right? Ah, come
right,
on.
right, right. So,
Oh,
so that is one of those lessons for me that I just always have to remember. When it happened, I was like, "Oh, I wish it hadn't for so many reasons, but like those things I had to live with." And here's the thing is that when I say that, you have the right to make your own bad decisions until you don't. And so that if somebody has diagnosed cognitive issues, then you can't just say that. But for instance, there's someone that I would work with who was in an assisted living. They really want to go back to their home. Their home is not habitable. I mean, it is rat infested. It has no running water. I mean, it's truly one of those like somebody hasn't vacuumed in a week. It is truly not something where somebody could live safely. And in that situation, if that person is going to choose to go back there, that is one again where I would have to recommend adult protective services.
If you're going to put yourself in harm's way, that's different than just making a choice to not use the cane or the walker or the hearing aid, as the case may be. I can ask you a million times, please use your hearing aid. But if you're not going to use it, I can't go put it in your ear for you. I mean, I suppose I could, but that would feel really aggressive.
And that is sort of one of those things that I've gone in lots of times and I've said to people, do you want resources? Do you want resources to help you stop smoking? If they say no, I say, okay, great, let's move on. And sometimes I'll have people say, wait. You're not going to tell me I need to quit smoking? I'm like, no, you've been smoking for 60 years. There's not a single thing I can tell you that you do not know about smoking. You've seen everything. I can't make you stop smoking, but if you are ready and you want to make a change, then, but I'm never, ever, ever, ever going to convince somebody to stop smoking because I think they should stop smoking.
This brings me so full circle back to what we started with, was this idea of letting your parent lead, right? What is stressful for you right now, mom or dad? What do you need me to help you with? How can I support you? So taking your cues from that person, assuming that they are mentally capable and able, versus us trying to be that helicopter daughter, which I will tell you, I have helicopter daughter moments for sure. You want to demonstrate your care and your love and your compassion for your older parent. But when you become too aggressive, all of a sudden it's not helpful.
So I never recommend calling your parents when you only have 15 minutes and asking them what's going on, what life changes do we want to make, when you're like, oh shoot, I'm taking my daughter to the airport in 15 minutes. I can't do this, So yeah.
Choosing when to have the meaningful conversation and when to do the quick check-in. Although sometimes you never know what you're going to get when you pick up the phone.
Totally. And sometimes, but I think it's okay to say, Mom, Dad, this is something that I'm going to need to do a little research into this, like something on their phone isn't working or whatever it is, whatever issue that they're calling with. Do you mind if I do a little research or I do a little thinking about this and I call you back about it? It really means a lot that you trust me enough to ask me this question. Let me do a little research. Let me do a little thinking. Would it be okay if I got back to you in an hour?
On that note, are there any final thoughts about therapy services for parents or older adults that you want to leave with us before we say farewell?
I do have these mantras that I think all the time, and that is, you're doing the best that you can in this situation with the information you have at the time.
I use that phrase of we're making the best decision we can with the information we have now in dealing with my parents, but also it's become a good mantra for me just in my regular day-to-day life. Like whatever the thing is, I mean, whatever, I don't know, something financial or something travel related or something house related. It's like, you know what, this might not be the best decision 20 years from now, but right now we're doing the best we can. And let's just give ourselves a little grace and go with it. We're being thoughtful. There's not much more you can do. Well, we are excited about Sunset Counseling and this idea of offering counseling to older adults and really supporting the whole family in addition to supporting that older adult. It's really benefiting everybody in their ecosystem. So I thank you for your wisdom and bringing it to the audience of Who Gets the China. And I encourage anyone who's listening, share this episode with somebody that you know and love who's helping care for aging parents, because they will appreciate these little nuggets of wisdom as much as we do. So thanks for being here, Julie.
Thank you.
Who Gets the China is written and hosted by Kirsten Mao, produced by Aaron Bryce of Blue Ogden Productions. Our theme music is composed by Greg Fellman of Wind Sand Productions. Our cover art is by Jen Beam of Gigawatt Studio. For more stories and expert advice, follow along on Substack or at www.whogetsthechina.com. If you enjoyed this episode, please share it with someone who might appreciate the conversation. And don't forget to rate, review, and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. Until next time.